Well, good morning again, everybody. So glad you chose to spend part of your weekend with us. My name is Joel, if we haven't met, and I'm excited that you're here for week 3, the last week of our teaching series, The Art of Us. We said this throughout the series, that relationships are not a problem you solve, they're an art that you learn. That the most impactful, beneficial, or frustrating relationships that you have in your life, whether it be with your partner, whether it be with your kids, whether it be with your coworkers, they're not a problem you solve. Relationships are not math. It's more an art that you learn. Our relationships are not a problem that you solve because you are a complicated cocktail of emotions and experiences and temperament and personality. And your kids are the same kind of deal because you raised them. And we are complicated beings. And so whenever we look at relationships as a problem that you can solve, a math equation or a science equation, man, we just miss the mark and we miss what I believe God has for us. And so throughout this series, we've been talking about the art of us and the art of relationships, where we're having new perspectives on how to walk in our most important relationships and new practices that we can step into that help us grasp all that our relationships are meant for. And throughout the series, we've talked about connection, the art of connection, which is through vulnerability and really sharing with our partners and with the people that matter the most to us what's going on underneath the hood. But that is hard to do. But vulnerability is something that we're called to grow. And last week we talked about the art of communication and how most of communication is not in the wah, 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 wah. It's in the listening. And we learned how to listen incarnationally and listen empathetically the way that Jesus listened and walked on the earth. And today we're going to talk about the art of commitment. How to have relationships that are in it for the long haul, that people stop and stare at and they long for in their own lives. Relationships that are not just okay, but they're truly flourishing and thriving. As we've been talking about art, I've thought about many of the art pieces that are famous, that are priceless in art galleries and museums. They're almost mystifying in and of themselves. There's something that looks immaculate and sacred almost when you look at these priceless pieces of art. Like, for example, here, it's a classic right here. This is the girl with the pearl earring, just sort of mesmerizing her eyes and the look there, and then the earring right there. I wanted to do a little bit of a thought experiment, though. To think like how mystifying and how powerful pieces of art like this are, but what would have to change to where they're okay? Like, oh, that's interesting, but that's a little off. That's a little weird. They're just okay. Like, for example, what if it wasn't the girl with the pearl earring, it was the girl with the AirPod? Not quite as stop and stare, and you'd probably try to talk to her, and she'd be like, hold, and then have to talk to you. Or here's Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers. This is one of his most famous pieces of art. I love how you see almost the different kind of life of these sunflowers, some like early and some wilting, and the different yellows that are beautiful there. But I was imagining what would have to change in this to where it was just kind of like, okay, that's weird, that's interesting, but not as immaculate and not as mystifying. So what if the setting change, it was at a gas station and you had there, like, you see cigarette butts there right next to the sunflowers, gas prices that are just, they all make us want to cry all the time, right? But like, it just doesn't pull you in the exact same way. Here's an American piece of art that, man, there's like nothing more American than this right here, right? We had Washington crossing the Delaware. Look at the resolve on his face, the icy waters, and it just sort of draws you in thinking about the American story. But what if the boat was different? It would just be okay if it was a pontoon, right? Spirit of 76, I like that. Liberty Lager. Some of you guys are like, heck yeah, brother, this is much cooler than the original, all right? But like, it takes art like from being like incredible and mystifying and almost sacred to just okay. And we don't want okay in any area of our life. I remember seeing this AT&T commercial years ago. Check this out.
Have you ever worked with Dr. Francis? Oh yeah, he's okay.
Just okay?
Guess who just got reinstated? Well, not officially. Nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I'll see you in there.
Just okay is not okay.
So we don't want okay in any area of our lives, especially with healthcare, right? But the reality is that we are invited into a story that God's writing where he doesn't want us to just have okay relationships. Here's a thought I want to put in front of you, that God wants you to thrive and flourish in your relationships even more than you do yourself. As a church, we're in this season that we're calling Thrive, where we want to be a church that recognizes and celebrates that the kingdom of God, the up there, is crashing into earth. But Thrive is this initiative where we're saying that the up there is breaking into everyday life. The kingdom of heaven is breaking into everyday life, moving us from just surviving to flourishing through life. And hear me, my friends, like God wants you to thrive in your relationships. He doesn't want you to have just okay. He doesn't want you to survive. He wants to invite you into a relational rhythm and sphere of life where you are thriving in your relationships and they're not just okay. And here's what I know about you, even though I might not know you all that well, is that we all long for our marriage relationships, our romantic relationships, our parents' relationships. We all long for them to go the distance. We all long for there to be committed love until we breathe our last breath. There was this movie in 2007 called Juno that won a couple Academy Awards. And in the plot of the movie, there's a young teenage girl who her and her boyfriend get pregnant. And she decides to keep the baby and give the baby up for adoption. But as she's going through her journey of being pregnant in high school, we see that she saw all these relationships that were just not good examples of people thriving and flourishing in the relationship. Like her parents had been married for a long time, but things were not good there. Her and her boyfriend, as you can imagine, things ended up being very full of drama and not good there. And even the adoptive couple, this family that's going to adopt her baby, she thinks that they have a picture perfect marriage, and it seems like the veneer fades off of that, and you see there's more sinister things going on there, so that's not healthy either. And there's a moment in the movie when she speaks to her dad, who's played by actor J.K. Simmons, and she says this to her father: I guess I wonder sometimes if people ever stay together for good, like people in love. That I just need to know if it's possible for two people to stay happy together forever. In spite of all that we've experienced, in spite of all that we have seen in our family history, in our culture, in movies, in our friends' lives, we still want to believe what Juno wanted to believe, that there was a way that people could stay together and want to be together forever. I think we all envision this for our lives, especially those of us that are married. We envision this long-term commitment to each other. We envision growing old together, sitting on the front porch, drinking sweet tea together, watching our grandkids, our bodies changing and drooping together until the end, right? We picture that, right? And I'll just say this, like, I think there's something beautiful and sacred about that. I think that's a bit of the image of God on your life, that is what you were created for, and that's what you and I are invited to embody. This kind of love that stays together. And there's a big difference between a love that stays together and falling in love. I'll put it this way, that falling in love, the only requirement for falling in love is a pulse, right? I mean, I don't know if you can remember like that very first crush. For me, it was Kelly Kapowski on Saved by the Bell, or Topanga from Boy Meets World, right? But like you have those pictures like where you're, oh, that's the person, right? Or maybe it's for you in middle school or early high school where that first girl, that first boy that paid attention to you and gave you those eyes. You thought, this is love, this is it, this is forever, right? And we think like that's what love really is, but all that really requires is attraction. All it requires is some emotion, some sentiment. It doesn't really require anything. Staying in love is different. I think we're living in a time and in a culture and in a moment where staying in love, man, it's never been more difficult to actually stay in love. I asked myself this last week as I was preparing this, like, why does it seem like commitment over the long haul is harder than ever? I think a couple reasons, and you can disagree with these, but this is just what I came up with. I think that there's so many people growing up now where they didn't really have an image or a picture of what it really looks like in their homes. Like their parents, maybe their parents divorced, maybe their parents are together, but things are not good. There's like the relationship is known for the bickering and the passive aggressiveness and them spending their own different time, or it's different, their time in different places around their home. And so we're not really given an image and a picture of what a thriving, committed love, fulfilling relationship actually looks like. I think that's a part of it. We weren't given examples of it, right? Another part of it is that I don't think that we were given tools to have healthy, thriving relationships from our parents or our grandparents or examples as well. There have been a lot of social scientists that have done research on the emotional tools that are needed for a life-giving, fulfilling relationship. And here are some of those emotional tools that help relationships go the long haul: respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection. And for many of us, like, we are walking around, we never saw this played out well, this list, and then we never received these things. And so we see somebody and we're like, oh, you're cute, and I need you to fill the void in all of these areas for me. Can you do that? That's a simple task, right? I find you attractive and do this for me, please. And because we weren't given these tools, it makes things complicated, it makes things messy, and it becomes a burden that no person can fulfill for you. Another reason why I think it's so hard for us to stay in love and to really experience fulfilling, committed love over the long haul is that I think our culture, we have a small tolerance, a low tolerance for pain and discomfort. I think our culture tells us, oh, are things not easy? Are things not flowing in your relationship right now? If you're not happy, you're probably just with the wrong person, so move on. The next person is going to make everything better. And so we just have this low threshold for pain. Go out and find somebody else who's there. That's going to be your soulmate, and they're going to fix all of your problems. Now, a sidebar here. When I talk about a low threshold for pain, I'm not speaking of those of us that might have experienced or maybe are experiencing emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. I'm not saying that you're weak for leaving. No, if that's you this morning, I'm going to say this a couple times, you need to leave. And I want to encourage you to leave. And it is the right thing for you to leave and be safe. Come talk to me if you need somebody else, or talk to somebody else around here that can help you do that. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just that discomfort. We're talking about that things are not in flow, things are not going well, and how easily we are just wanting to eject from our relationships. Staying in love, it's never been more challenging because we don't have these examples, we weren't given the tools, and we don't know how to actually walk it out and have uncomfortable, ordinary seasons of our relationships. What I love about Jesus in the realm of these conversations about relationships is that Jesus sees the definitions and the notions about what love is in a culture, and he speaks into it and he challenges it. He subverts it, and he invites us into something I think is deeper, it's better, it's purer, and it's truer, and it's more costly. The apostle John, who was one of Jesus' closest friends, he's writing one of the biographies of Jesus' life, the Gospel of John, and he spends a ton of time on the last week of Jesus' life. And so in John chapter 13, Jesus is heading into his last night on earth, and he's heading into the Last Supper with his friends, and Jesus gives some more teaching in John chapter 13, and he's got his friends around him, his disciples that have been journeying with him around him, and he says this: "A new command I give you." To which I imagine that these Jewish young men, these Jewish teenagers are like, a new one? We've already got the 10 commandments. We've got 613 commandments throughout the rest of the Old Testament. Really? We're doing a new command here tonight? And Jesus like, yeah, I want to give you something fresh, something that is going to give you vision for your future. He says, a new command I give you. And he says this next: love one another. And this is where it sounds so sentimental and so soft. And they're probably like, Jesus, you should have studied harder for this little message. Like, that's what you got? Love one another, just be nice to one another, like feel some warm fuzzies, some butterflies towards each other. That's really what you got? Because the disciples, just like us today, we get a ton of mileage out of the idea of love. We say that we love tacos. And we love our spouse. We use the same word, right? We love that new truck. We love this outfit that we just got. And we also say that, oh, we just love our grandkids, right? We get so much mileage out of this word love. But what's interesting is that Jesus uses a word for love that would have perked up their ears, and it should perk up our ears. Jesus doesn't use a word that's about warm feelings or about sentiment. He uses the word agape. specifically the verb form of this word, agapeo. And agape love in the first century was not soft. It had muscle to it. It was visceral. Agape love was the most noble form of love known about in the ancient world. It's sacrificial love. It's a welcoming love. It's an accepting love. It's a I will pick you up and make you better kind of love. And Jesus says, a new command I give you, love one another. And then he defines for them what this loving one another actually looks like. He says, as I have loved you, so you must love, agapeo, one another. As I've loved you. You know what this love looks like? Don't take your cue from Jim and Pam from The Office. Don't take your cue from Ross and Rachel. We were on a break from Friends. Like, don't take your cue from Lucy and Ricky. Like, don't take your cue from those kind of relationships. As I have loved you, as I have welcomed you, as I have forgiven you, as I have served you, as I have blessed you. This is the love that you are called to give one another. Take your cue from me, the one who's about to go to the cross and die for you. Tim and Kathy Keller wrote a book about 20 years ago now. I read it about 10 years ago now. Tim and Kathy, they led a church in Manhattan, New York City. And they wrote a book called The Meaning of Marriage, where they look at our culture's notion of love compared to the type of love that is expounded upon throughout the pages of Scripture. And Tim Keller says this about what love truly is. It's the agape type of love. Love is a willingness to give yourself for someone else's flourishing. Love is beyond sentiment. It's beyond emotions. It's beyond attraction. This is what love is. It's a willingness to give yourself for someone else's flourishing, for their thriving. Love is action before emotion. We often think that we have action of love towards people once we feel something, but the biblical idea of love is action before emotion. It's not how you feel, but it's how you move towards someone to better them. Love is others-centric. It's aimed at the good of the other person, even if it costs you something. Love is covenantal. It's based in a commitment, and it's not consumer-based on what you can get out of somebody else or the convenience that comes to you. Love is this willingness to give yourself for someone else's flourishing. And when both people do that, it is an unstoppable force. What Jesus is getting at, what Tim and Kathy Keller are getting at, is that committed love, staying in love, has to be more than what we typically make it in our culture. I'll put it this way. To stay in love, you've got to make love. Awkward pause. A verb. That was for you, 9 a.m. You didn't know if you should giggle at that yet because it was early and we're in church. But to stay in love, we've got to make love, see love as a verb, not as a noun, not as emotion, not as sentiment, not as simple attraction. To stay in love, to be an artist at committed love, we've got to be people that make love a verb. So what I want to do with the rest of our time is I want to give us 3 different practices to help us grow in our individual relationships in making love a verb, an action verb, the way that Jesus intended it to be, and in the way that helps us thrive in our relationships for the long haul. Word of warning, if you're sitting next to your significant other, let's be more mature than the elbows this morning. Let's look at what the scriptures are about to teach us, not as a weapon to use on our partners, but as a mirror for us to see ourselves. Can we be mature like that? And let's be challenged together so that we can grow as relational artists in the art of commitment. The first challenge I want to give us is this. I want to challenge you to love by fighting for the relationship. You guys know this, that like conflict and fights in our relationships, they're normal, they're healthy, they're to be expected because there are 2 unique people that are coming together as one in a relationship with different histories and different personalities. And of course, there's going to be combustion of these 2 things when they collide. But healthy relationships actually have conflict. It was almost 20 years ago now that I did my very first session of premarital counseling with a couple. And in this session of premarital counseling, we got to the one moment where we're going to talk about conflict. And I'm like setting the stage. I'm like, hey, we've been meeting the last couple of weeks. Like, we're getting more comfortable with each other. What kind of fights do you guys have as a couple? And at that moment, it was so awkward because they looked at each other They look back at me, they held each other's hand, and I'm like, what am I about to get here? What am I about to get? And they look back at each other and be like, well, we've been together for a year and a half, and we've never had a fight. And they thought that was something that was going to make me really happy. And all the lights were going off in my dashboard like, oh no, we are in trouble here. So as a minister of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, all I did for the next 30 minutes in this premarital counseling session was try to instigate a fight in this moment. Because I knew that this is healthy. This is something that they had to work out how to do it. Because when there's conflict, when there's fights, it's when two individual people can actually share what's going on underneath the hood and what they're really thinking and feeling. And if they can't fight, one person's getting bulldozed over and over and over again, and they can't really talk, they can't really share who they are, and resentment will come out in the long haul, and things are going to be broken if they can't really fight about it. And this is what I know about you. Is that no, you don't want a relationship for 20 years. There's resentment and fight layered on top of resentment and fight and bitterness brewed up inside of you to where that's just all that you have is a hardness of heart towards another person. And again, just a disclaimer, man, if you're in an abusive relationship and you are being harmed emotionally, physically, sexually, I'm not talking about those kind of conflicts and fights. Again, please hear my voice. You should leave, and we want to help you get to safety. But if you are just fighting and having these recurring arguments and you can't move past them, there's a better path forward. Jesus, in his very first sermon that he gave, maybe one of the best sermons ever given, the Sermon on the Mount, he begins with explaining what it looks like to live life in rhythm with the kingdom of God, partnering with God, and the good life that happens inside of that. And he talks about these unexpected places where the kingdom of God takes root in our life and we live life in rhythm with God. And he says this in that sermon. He said, blessed, the good life belongs to, blessed, happy are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Now we read over this quickly often, but notice, Jesus does not say, blessed are the peacekeepers. Like those who are like, I'm just here to keep the peace. I'm going to stuff down my emotions. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to go to my own corner and act like it doesn't bother me. I'm going to let my aggression come out in passive aggressive comments to the side, stab them from the side, not the front later. No, he doesn't say, blessed are the peacekeepers. And he definitely doesn't say, blessed are the war wagers, the warmongers who love to burst in the door with facts and history and recordings of what people said and love to fight and win, like lawyers who love to win the verbal argument. Like Jesus doesn't say that's where blessing is found. He doesn't say that the children of God are called warmongers or war wagers or peacekeepers. He says it's peacemakers. That's where God's kingdom is found. Is when we can fight for the relationship, fight for the restoration of what's broken, not just fight to win. And this is a challenging word for Joel personally, because there was one part of my life that I thought I was going to go to law school and be a lawyer. I wanted to be Kokomo's Matlock. If you're under 30, you have no idea what that reference is. And I'm not talking about Kathy Bates, no. But I love arguing. I love winning arguments. I love the verbal sparring kind of thing. And so it's really easy for me to get locked into thinking that if I win the argument, I'm going to win. But my brothers and sisters, isn't it true that you have won arguments and you've lost something in the relationship, right? You've won an argument, and what did you really win? Here's your prize, sleeping on the couch on a Friday night, right? Like, what do you really win? You lose something in the relationship. And that's the difference between peacekeepers and war wagers and peacemakers. Peacemakers say there's something broken, there's something fractured in our relationship. And I want to go back to win the relationship. I want things to go back. I want things to be restored. So when you're fighting, when conflicts arise, if you want to have a committed kind of love, you guys fight for the relationship. Take your pride out of the equation. Take the L, take the loss, and you think about fighting for the person and you guys together, not just to win the fight. And let me just say this. If this is just descriptive of your life at home lately, your marriage is worth fighting for, you guys. Your relationship with your kids that have been drifting away and you're losing their heart, it's worth fighting for. Your friendships are worth fighting for, even if you guys disagree politically and you've drifted into different places. Your relationships and friendships are worth fighting for. So be peacemakers. Fight for the relationship. Make love a verb by fighting for your relationships. This is how we grow in the art of commitment. My next challenge for us is this. I want to challenge you to love by believing the best in the people you're in relationships with. Believing the best, choosing to believe the best. Paul, who was a church planner in the first century, wrote about 2/3 of our New Testament. He's writing to a church that is a hot mess express in Corinth. It's one of the letters he writes is 1 Corinthians. And chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, he says some words that I'm sure you've bumped into if you've ever been to a wedding, if you've ever bought an anniversary card for somebody. These are words that have been sentimentalized, but man, they are gritty if we consider them in the midst of a messed up community in Corinth where conflict was so rampant. Paul says this about love and how love acts. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. He continues and says this, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. This is what agape love looks like. How dare we sentimentalize this into a bumper sticker or a Hobby Lobby painting when this is something that is so challenging and just calling our lives to look like Jesus. So much action-oriented language, even these phrases that I've highlighted here near the end. Love always trusts, always hopes, and therefore love always perseveres. I think this is actually very action-oriented, not just something in our minds. Marcus Buckingham, who is a leadership expert who wrote a book about relationships and what sets relationships that are healthy apart from unhealthy relationships about 7 years ago. The book is called The One Thing You Need to Know. And in his chapter about marriage, he studied bad marriages and marriages that were great and thriving after 25, 40, 50 years. And the findings just stopped me in my tracks when I read this years ago. I assumed that what made for healthy, committed marriages was that each person really had a good index on their partner's strengths and weaknesses, and they just accepted them for their weaknesses, accepted them and loved and celebrated their strengths. I thought that's what would make a committed relationship last forever, not trying to make somebody who they're not, but just accepting them. That's not what the research found. It found something that was more shocking to me, and maybe it'll be for you as well. In this research about marriage, they interviewed and had people grade themselves on different characteristics of their life and how they actually lived in their marriage. It would grade them on communication, on responsibility, on respect, on appreciation, and they would grade themselves. And what the researchers found about relationships that were happy and fulfilling 40, 50 years down the road is that what they were called positive illusions or benevolent distortion. In other words, people's partners graded their partner better than they graded themselves on every single one of these characteristics. They actually had this benevolent distortion about how great their partners were. And they said and celebrated them for being better than what they even felt they were themselves. They chose to believe the most generous and kind and positive explanation for their partner, their spouse's behavior. They chose to believe it. Love always trusts, always hopes, always believes, and therefore love always perseveres. This is a great challenge for us in our most vital relationships, you guys. What do we do when there's a gap between our expectation and our reality with our spouses? For example, you text your spouse and you're like asking them a question, something that you need to know. That's the reality. And then you expect that they'll respond back to you in a timely manner because they're always on their phone. And you expect this, right? But they don't respond back. So what do you fill in that gap with? Do you fill it with suspicion or trust? Do you fill it with anger or do you fill it with the most positive, generous explanation you can give of, I'm sure something came up, maybe they lost their phone. I mean, what do you do in that gap? When you ask them to do something and they come home and they forgot to pick something up from Target on the way home. When there's a gap between what your expectation was that there'd be a Target bag in your kitchen when you got home and the reality was they forgot, how do you fill that gap? Do you fill it with anger and suspicion and being annoyed? Or do you just accept that, you've forgotten things too, and you fill it in with something important was going on? There is a choice that you and I can make in all of our relationships every day to fill that gap with trust and with belief and with positive illusions, with benevolent distortion that helps us grow in our committed love. Where there's a gap, what are you jumping to fill it with in your marriage? When there's a gap, what are you jumping to fill it with your coworkers? When you choose to fill it with hope, when you choose to fill it with trusting the best possible explanation, you will find love moving from just a feeling and a move to action, and then those feelings will actually grow as well. Making love a verb by choosing to believe the best is how we grow in the art of commitment, you guys. Choosing to believe the best. So we grow in our relationships by fighting for the relationships. We grow by choosing to believe the best. And one last practice, to committed love, we grow by service, by choosing to serve one another. To never checking out, but making love a verb by service. Again, we were in John 13 earlier when Jesus was giving a teaching. Earlier on in this same moment at the Last Supper with Jesus' disciples, we're given a picture into what true love and true power actually looks like. John starts chapter 13 explaining this about Jesus. It says, Jesus, at this moment, he knew that the Father had put all things under his power. In other words, he knew and he trusted that God had made him the Son of God, that God had given him authority and he was the king of all the cosmos, and that he had come from God and he was returning to God, that God had him in the palm of his hand in his story. So how do we fill in this gap? What would we think if we were told we had all power and all authority in all the universe? Do you think Jesus would then demand his disciples to sing him a worship song, lifting not one hand but two hands and closing their eyes? Do you think Jesus would command his disciples, his friends, to get down on their knees and pray to him? What would Jesus demand in this moment? Because this has everything to do with God's character. But that's not what the scriptures tell us. It says that after he knew this, so this is what Jesus did. So he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Jesus, in this moment where he has full authority and where he is being enthroned as the king of the universe, what does he do? He gets down in the role of a servant, and he washes his friends' stinky, sweaty, sandy feet. Come on, I might be belaboring the point, but to Jesus, love is not sentimental. Love is not cheap. Love is costly. And here, love is clearly serving one another. And if we want a committed love for us as well, we have got to become people and stay checked in as people to serve our loved ones. A couple years ago, as we were settling in our family of having two kids, even before we had our third, I would have my nighttime routine with our two oldest, our boys, where, get them ready for bed, and then I'd, pray with them in their bed. We'd read a couple books, and then I would come downstairs, and I would just feel like I'm clocked out for the night because I got these kids down, everything's good, and I would just rot on the couch for a while, scrolling on my phone or streaming something, and because I felt like I was clocked out for the night. And it was honestly, embarrassingly, it was like months into this rhythm and this pattern where I felt like I was done for the evening that I realized, hey, where's Megan? What's Megan up to? And Megan was doing the rounds of, hey, will you lay in my bed, Mommy, and rub my back for a few minutes? Mommy, will you read me one more book? Mommy, I need to go to the bathroom. Mommy, this, Mommy, that. And I am just blissfully unaware downstairs on the couch. And then Megan would come downstairs and for her mental clarity working at home, she likes everything to be picked up. And then I'd be sitting on the couch and then she'd be going and picking up the toys and then cleaning the kitchen and all this kind of stuff. And I'm so embarrassed to say it out loud, but there were so many times where I just felt like I had done my part. I had checked out for the night and I just sat there and let it happen. Embarrassing, honestly. But there was a change that I felt like I had to make and that I was encouraged to consider. To where now, like, man, I come downstairs and I'm not clocked out yet. Like, I know that there's a door that I can close on the toy room and I can just close it and the robot vacuum sweeper won't suck anything up. But you know what? Megan likes the toys put back where they belong. And so I'm on my hands and knees picking up toys, putting things back. I'm taking out the trash. I'm making sure the blankets and the pillows are back. I'm making sure that if there's laundry that needs to be done and the basket's overflowing, that I'm at least starting the laundry. If I'm a super husband, I try to finish the laundry too, right? But it was a shift in me to move from like just saying, I'm doing my part, I'm checked out for the day. And man, I say this all like, this is again, art, not science. There's times that I mess this up and I miss the mark in this, like all these different kind of things here. But I'm telling you, like that is a way that my wife receives love. And that's a way that I can love her, action verb, love her by serving her and serving our family at night, even though that's no fun at all, right? This is the kind of love that Jesus invites us into, service. To not check out on what can lighten the load of someone else, but by serving them. This is you saying, hey, I'll clean the kitchen. Hey, I'll bring home dinner. I'll cook dinner. Let me mow the yard. Let me do the laundry tonight. Let me lighten your load because I appreciate you. Hear me, especially if you've been in a marriage for 5 years plus. It is easy for us to check out, fall into our functional utilitarian roles and check out on serving our partners. Don't do it. Don't check out. This is how you fan the flames of committed love over time, not by feeling love, but by acting lovingly towards your spouse by serving them. So we're all going to just cut the service early. You guys go outside and go wash your spouse's car. We'll just in there. It's a little easier than telling you to go wash people's feet, right? We make love a verb. We grow in committed love, you guys, when we choose to fight for our relationships, when we choose to believe the best when there's a gap between expectation and reality, when we choose to actively, committingly serve our partners. This is how we grow in the art of commitment. This is how we don't just fall in love, but we stay in love for the long